Hello, everyone, and welcome to History 107, World History's introductory lecture on Wallerstein's World System Approach. History is a study of past events and human affairs. Often it's considered a continuous chronological record of important or public events of a particular trend or institution. Formulating a world civilization course lends itself to creating lectures that merely list dates and names that do not lend themselves to a relevant, interconnected theme. Finding a methodological approach that incorporates all aspects of world history has been debated by historians over the decades. Looking at the time period covered in the second half of a world civilizations course, roughly 1650 and beyond, the amount of history is unapologetically Eurocentric and essentially a history of the rise of the West. Finding a way to organize the subject matter of a world civilization course lends itself to many problems. First, how is the subject matter to be organized? One way would be to merely list it chronologically, but how is one to incorporate all of the world into a specific lecture on a specific time period? Second, what kind of themes should be discussed? Are the overarching themes that can be applied to all lectures worldwide? Obviously, this would be difficult, as it might require the scholar to stereotype cultures and leave out others. Lastly, if one is a product of the West, how are they to create a course emphasizing the West? Although this may be a problem when creating a world history course prior to 1500, history following this date is predominantly Western. After the discovery of the New World and the developments caused by the 16th century maritime revolution, Europe dominated the world stage. It is this dominance that led to Immanuel Wallerstein's world system approach, which I feel creates clear and coherent explanations for globalization that occurred in the 21st century. Before discussing the world systems approach, however, it's necessary to understand why it was developed. A precursor to this world systems approach can be seen in the development of the Marxist theory. One of the predominant features of Marxist theory is the dialectical and materialist concept of history. According to Marxist thought, humankind's history is fundamentally that of the struggle between social classes, particularly the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Economically speaking, the productive capacity of society is the foundation of society. And as the capacity increases over time, the social relations of production and class relations evolve through this struggle of the classes and pass through definitive stages: primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, and eventually capitalism. As this economy grows, legal, political, and ideological aspects of society are derived from these production relations, as is the consciousness of the individuals of which society is composed. For Marx, there is and always has been this dialectic between classes, and was made most apparent with the revolutions in France beginning in 1789. Aside from this dialectic and materialistic concept of history, Marxism is also a critique of capitalism. According to Marx, in a capitalist society, an economic minority dominates and exploits the working class. Marx uncovered the inner workings of capitalist exploitation, particularly the way in which unpaid labor was extracted from the working class. Although the work done by the working class appeared socialized, ownership remained in the hands of the bourgeoisie. According to Marx, without the elimination of rival ownership, human society is unable to achieve further development. Marx takes his theory one final step, and advocates for a proletarian revolution, which we'll discuss later in the course. In order to overcome the unfairness created by private ownership, the working class must seize political power internationally through a social revolution and expropriate the capitalist classes around the world and replace them with collective ownership. Upon this material foundation, classes would be abolished and the material basis for all forms of inequality between humankind would dissolve. These features of Marxist thought would later lead to the foundations of socialism and communism, two economic and political structures that made their debut in the 19th and 20th centuries, respectively. Marxism created a new lens to analyze history. Historians were able to look back in time and recognize class struggle. However, this also caused them to project their 19th century presentist ideals on the past. Marxists also looked at history in a very particular way. They believed that history should be used as a tool to foment and foster revolutions. Only by understanding historical classes or class struggle would societies recognize their need to revolt. Contrary to Marxist thought, another school of historians began to develop in the 40s. The analysts wanted to produce an approach which rejected politics, diplomacy, war, and economics that had dominated the French scholarship influenced by Marxist theory. Instead, they pioneered an approach to a study of long-term historical structures over events and political transformations. Geography, material culture, and what later analysts would call mentalities were also characteristic areas of study. The analysts advocated a histoire totale or histoire tout court, a complete study of a historic problem. A leading analyst was Fernand Braudel. Braudel used the longue durée approach pioneered by the analysts to stress slow and often imperceptible effects of space, climate, and technology on the actions of human beings. In the past, Braudel, after living through two world wars and incredible political upheavals in France, was deeply uncomfortable with the notion that multiple ruptures and discontinuities create history, as Marxists believed. Instead, Braudel and his fellow analysts preferred to stress inertia and the longue durée. Special attention was paid to geography, climate, and demography as long-term factors. Analysts, in turn, believed that continuities of the deepest structures were central to history and rejected the aforementioned idea that history should be used as a tool to foment revolutions. It is this school of history, coupled with Marxism and the newly emerging post-colonial nation-states, that gave rise to Immanuel Wallerstein's world systems approach. While Marxists claim that imperialism of the highest stage of capitalism led to a set of mechanisms which redistributes resources from the periphery to the core, in his terminology, the core is the developed, industrialized, democratic parts of the world, and the periphery is the underdeveloped, raw materials exporting poor parts of the world. World systems analysts argue that capitalism, as a historical social system, has always integrated a variety of labor forms within a functioning division of labor. Countries do not have economies, but are part of the world economy. According to Wallerstein, there have only been 3 periods in which a core nation has dominated in the world system. The first began around 1450, when Spain and Portugal took the lead in establishing overseas colonies. When the Spanish and Portuguese became overextended in their empire building, they were replaced by the economic dominance of the Netherlands in the 17th century. Dutch financial investment helped England gain productivity and trade dominance, and Dutch military support helped England to defeat the French, the other country competing for dominance at the time. As a result of this new British dominance, the world system became relatively stable again during the 1800s. The final country that dominated the world system was the United States, which took the place of England after the First World War. Although a world systems approach can lend itself to exceptionalism, it is evident that after the 16th century, certain countries were dominant on the world stage. This course will begin with the rise of European nations such as England, France, Austria, and Russia, and the rise of imperialism. As we look at these core nations, we can then look at the nations that could be considered the periphery. This does not necessarily relegate these countries to substandard regions, but in turn shows their importance in the rise of the imperial powers. It is therefore the world systems approach that allows for the complete analysis of world history after 1650.